All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships podcast. And today I am here with my friend Neil Moore. Neil, welcome.
Hey, Kevin, great to see you.
Me too.
Actually, I'm an Australian, as you know. I like to just address that in the beginning because oftentimes people are like, what's that accent? I'm an Australian, but I live in the United States, but I'm actually in Australia right at the moment.
Yeah.
And haven't been here for 2.5 years because of COVID, and arrived here. And no sooner did I get here than I got COVID. So I've been here and I've been in, mandatory quarantine and lockdown, and came over to see my aging mother who's in full-time care, and I can't see her. I did get to see her, before I got COVID, but this has just been quite a disruption being here, and I don't even know when I can leave the country. So not a bad place to be stuck in, but at the same point in time, it's ironic that I'm
right.
here.
Well,
good to see you. Good to see you, and thank you for having me as your guest today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So what we'll do is, you and I'm trying to think when you and I met, Neil. I know it was through Genius Network, through our affiliation in Genius Network, and it's been a few years. And I know it was even before Geo had his very first Archangel event, because you and I were you at his very first Archangel event?
I think we met in 2011, I think it was.
Yeah. So it's been a good 11 years. Yeah.
That's right.
So it's been, man, time flies. And so what I'll do is, you and I met through Genius Network, and it has been such an honor getting to just know you and spend time with you over the years. And I'm really excited to, share your story around this. But what we'll do is we'll just kind of start by letting you share a little bit about what you do, who you serve, what motivates you to do what you do, and just kind of give everybody an idea of like, who is Neil Moore?
Well, thank you. As is the case for all of us, very often, you're meeting people and that question of what do you do? And my simplest answer to that, my simplest response to that is that I'm a musician. But more accurately, I'm an educator. I don't consider myself a performing artist, actually. I have never been comfortable playing for people, in front of people, never. Music's always been a very, very private thing to me. And I love to compose, and I'm someone who struggles to learn things. But in my struggle to learn things, I find efficiencies in the learning process. And I've discovered over my lifetime that I've learned how to communicate those efficiencies in a way that allows people to accelerate their own ability to learn that which I had to struggle through. And that's translated over into my musical life, in that I've developed a method of music learning that's very unusual. And I hear music and I see 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. And this has been with me since very, very early childhood. And I discovered as an adult that I have a way of communicating that to people in a way that allows them to see music through the same lens as I see it. And it was a discovery to see that in that process, it would transform how quickly people were able to learn how to play music. So over a period of decades, I developed this into an entire vast curriculum, a structured curriculum, teaching people how to look at music this way, teaching people how to play. And then I developed it into a system of training educators, and it's grown now into a multinational organization. And primarily, we train music educators around the world who want to be licensed to teach my system of education. So that's primarily what I do. The second part of your question was, what motivates me to do that? There's a couple of ways of answering that question, and so speaking earnestly, for me, it's a God thing. That firstly, it doesn't matter to me whether this is true or not. I just get value out of believing that it's true. And my interpretation of this is that I was born with a perspective that was pre-installed. It's a gift. I'm also of the view that a gift is only a gift if it's being given. Otherwise, it's the talent. So this was a gift, not for me. This was a gift to be given. And I have had the opportunity to directly contribute to the connection to people's natural musicality and the self-expression of people all over the world. And for me, the bigger purpose here is that I believe that I can contribute to causing a breakthrough in people's access to their musicality and their creative capability. And I think we can elevate the creative capability of humanity. And I think there's never been a time in history where that's more critically essential. In fact, I'm of the view that given the pending arrival of the technological tsunami, which we are all seeing, the extent to which we're only scratching the tip of the iceberg, but in the next decade, we see the arrival of technologies that will forevermore redefine humanity, redefine the experience of what it means to be human. Yeah. And I'm of the view that the critical personal attribute will be our creative capability. Humanity needs to become the most creative version of our species yet, as we move towards evolving into human 2.0.
Yeah. Neil, I really appreciate what you just shared there. And I'm going to have to go back to listen to the recording of this to get the exact verbiage, but I know it, you said something along like, I don't care if this is true, but I choose to believe it's true. And so for you, therefore it is true. And like, that's not the exact words that you use, but
no, you're right. You're right.
That makes me think of what something that my friend and I believe Jesse Elder too and stuff. But he's like, do you want to be, are you concerned about being right, or do you want it to just be, is it useful? More and believing that is useful, whether it's actually right or not, who cares? It's a useful belief to have.
And that works for me, that interpretation. I think faith trumps fact every time.
Yes. Yeah. And I subscribe to that in the work that I do too, as far as, just supporting the entrepreneurs, the CEOs, the founders that we support and stuff, and same kind of thing. And okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. And so have you ever been introduced to a person that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person? And Neil, I am really excited to hear you share your story, your experience around this. And I'll tell you, my goal for this podcast has always been really simple. For one, I want to give people like yourself the story to share your experience around this, and to honor somebody who's had such a profound impact on your life and on your business. And on the other side, for the listener, I want to inspire other CEOs, other founders, other entrepreneurs to place an intentional focus on creating more real, meaningful, rewarding, and profitable relationships in their lives. And so with that, the floor is yours, Neil.
It's a fantastic question. Actually, Kevin, ordinarily, if I have an opportunity to be on a podcast or any sort of interview format, and often ask the question, look, we'll send you the questions in advance. I'm happy not to ever know what the questions are. I find that I speak more naturally and authentically when I speak improvisationally. And at the same point of time, when I first heard from you about this, I really appreciated the flavor of the question, because it gave me that opportunity to not so much to become aware of it, because I do have a very distinct and clear awareness of this, but it gave me the opportunity to ruminate over that. Mm-hmm. And that's the prior to us getting on the call today, just that experience of having the opportunity to ruminate over it has been really valuable. So I
That's
appreciate
awesome.
it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I also think that I actually have three answers to that.
Okay.
To that question. And one of them, which I think is most likely the most common shared experience for people, that concept of how we live life forward but understand it backward. I can see points where a contribution was made by people that had a very significant impact. Essentially looking back down the other end of the telescope, I can see that the contribution or the impact of that person became a major stepping stone in the pathway of my life. Like, for example, my parents' choice to have their children learn music from a very young age. The actual experience that I had with my music teacher, who was the same music teacher as my older brothers, but my experience was completely different than theirs. Totally. I learned very differently, and that teacher had an arrangement with my mother that he would just leave me alone, let me do my own thing. And thank God that he let me do my own thing, because this relationship that I have with music was allowed to flourish and grow. And what I've created and contributed would have never happened were it not for that. A music teacher as an adult for me, who I didn't learn how to read music until I was an adult, and he had a system of learning that really was the catalyst for me coming to the United States. And then subsequently there was an interaction with another person, and I'll tell you about it in a moment, that really consolidated all the pieces of that puzzle. So from that point of view, I can see that there have been certain milestones along the way that were contributed to significantly. And generally my experience has been, when I talk to people about the pathway of their lives, we all tend to have those moments, that become stepping stones. But more specifically, there is a very, very clear and obvious answer to that question, even though there are two people that I'm going to talk about. Without doubt, the person who my life and all about my life, everything that I've done, everything that I've contributed, would not be what it is were it not for meeting my wife. Now, the story to that also is very clearly a part of what I perceive to be the divine design that's shaped the pathway of my life. And this is also one of those things as to, that I consider this to be a God thing. And once again, I don't care if that's true or not. It's just clear as day to me, the value that comes as a result of me believing that. And so I'd like to tell you about this story, because there's a lot about our relationship that's unique. I met my wife, she had just turned 12 and I had just turned 13. And I was born into a beautiful family, a loving family, beautiful parents, a very safe home. There was never arguing or fighting in the home. It was loving. We never wanted for anything. Even so, I was a pretty troubled kid. And, there's a lot that I've done over my childhood that I look back and think, wow, I was a pretty disturbed kid. And I have plenty of stories to tell about the way in which that manifested. But my sister had a girlfriend, and this girlfriend had a younger sister. She was about my age. We were friends. And we've been friends since, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years of age.
Okay.
And there was this one, we would hang out together. We would have sleepovers together as kids. We were just buddies. There was one day where she called me and she said, let's go ice skating. I'm going to bring a friend from school. You bring a friend from school. So November the 21st, 1970, at 2 p.m. in Melbourne, Australia, I go to meet my friend and her girlfriend. And I'm introduced to her girlfriend and I shake her hand and I have this visceral experience that I've just come home.
Wow. Wow.
It wasn't even intellectualized. I just look back at the quality of the experience that I had, and I experienced a degree of comfort with this person. Ordinarily, I've always been terrified of girls. I've just been terrified of girls. And but the quality of my experience in meeting her was just safety and compatibility and connection. And we immediately developed a friendship. And we would have sleepovers, even as children. You know, it'd be Sunday morning and she'd hop into bed with me and we'd be just lying in bed reading comics together. Nothing more than just these two children just having a friendship. And that was a friendship that sustained itself. And then there was a particular, well, there was one day I was about, she was 20 and I was over at her place one day cooking her lunch. And we were just hanging out after lunch in her living room, like we would always do, just sitting there talking. And I had this overwhelming experience that I just wanted to kiss her. And that was really confusing for me because I had never had that experience with her before. And I thought I didn't act on that. That would have been inappropriate in the context of our relationship to act on that. So I just let it ride. I actually found out later that she'd been sitting there having the exact same experience and the exact same resistance and thinking, I can't do that. That's not the context of our relationship. Then soon after that, it was her 21st birthday party. And I couldn't, the 21st birthday party in Australia is a big deal. It's really the rite of passage, you know, into official adulthood. You've had a few practice years and now 21, you know, you enter into adulthood. I couldn't make it to a birthday party. I said, I'll take you to dinner. And I was over at her place. I was in the kitchen talking to her mum, and she walks in from her bedroom into the kitchen, and suddenly she occurred to me as a different human being. I was just blown away, like, wow. She just looked so magnificently beautiful. And, you know, we hopped in the car to go out to dinner, and within an hour, I'm like, I'm marrying this woman. And so we were inseparable from that day forward. So that was 18,787 days ago that I met her. I count every day.
Wow. Wow.
She is utterly extraordinary. So, I mean, as a person now, you know, we're both, I'm 65 next birthday, she's 64. So obviously she has the wisdom and the experience of a grandmother. You know, we've been friends for well over 50 years, married for coming up to 41 years. She has the life experience of being, you know, of nearly 40 years of parenting our 3 beautiful children. She's been self-employed for 40 years, so she has that world of experience. Physically, she has the body of an athletic 20-year-old. Energetically, she has the vibrance of an alive teenager, and she has the authenticity of a child, that unedited. She's deeply good. I don't think anybody escapes life. Life does its number on all of us, but she is the least bruised person that I've ever met. And she wakes up alive and vital, and she's like that all day, every day. Even in the most difficult times, her demeanor and her state of being is just so profound. And in so many ways, I'm like a kite blowing in a ferocious wind, and she's like just holding onto the rope, holding onto the string, and keeps me grounded. Her belief in me is unswerving. And my entrepreneurial pathway, as is often the case for most entrepreneurs, it's not linear and predictive. My entrepreneurial pathway has been bouncing all over the place. Yeah. And what appears to so many other people as risk or craziness or what the heck are you doing? For her, it's always been, you just go for it. If it's intuitively and instinctively right, that's what you do. I'm behind you. That's my job. I'm behind you. It's amazing, really.
Yeah. Wow.
Unbelievable who she's been for me. So I can think of nothing. Great about me, nor nothing that I've accomplished where I've really contributed to people, that I can't clearly tie back to who she's been for me and who she is for me. And so that question is immediately answerable, and she's the person who's been that for me.
Yeah. Wow.
So
you know, I've never you and I have known each other for a while, and we've never had this conversation, all
That's right.
because, Neil, I never asked you this question before. And so,
Yeah. I
and
actually do talk about her a lot. She's sort of my favorite thing to talk about, actually. Um, uh, and although there is another answer to the question, which I'm also happy to tell you about, but I wasn't sure whether there's anything else you wanted to say
you
about.
know, I just wanted to, when I have never in my life heard a man talk about his wife the way that you speak of your wife. Man, um, I myself, I mean, I love my wife. I appreciate my wife so much. I'm gonna show her a little bit more love, and show her some more appreciation. And
Yeah.
this is, man, you have just really given me something to aspire to, because my wife deserves to be spoke of that. I mean, I always speak well of my wife, but boy, Neil, you've taken it to a whole new level, man. And you've given me something to aspire to. So thank you for that, because I want to honor my own wife the way that you honor your wife. And I would imagine that a lot of guys who would listen to that might have the same feeling right about now, that like, wow, you know what? I want to honor my wife the way that Neil honors his wife. And so thank you for that.
My pleasure. You know, it's life's complex, and what a privilege it is to have someone just to be able to hang out with and share life with and go through it, to have that partnership, to have that companionship. And I think it's so easy when we develop familiarity with someone. It has such a beautiful quality to it, extreme familiarity. But so often what gets lost in the wonderfulness of familiarity is the intensity of the beauty, the spiritual beauty of love, and the respect and the appreciation and the gratitude. So it's actually one of my life practices, staying connected to both the appreciation for and the gratitude for the honor and privilege it is to someone who's willing to invest their life in loving me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, I'll tell you now, it's not often that I've had, it's very interesting, because like a lot of people that I've interviewed have said, Kevin, there's a number of people that came up for me. And there's a lot of people that have had life-changing impact on my life, on my business. And they've, for the most part, most of them have narrowed it down to one. Not everybody. There's a couple people that I've interviewed that have talked about two, or even one person talked about three. But I there's no way I could stop the interview now and say, no, Neil, we got to stop here, because like you said, I gave you the question in advance. You got the test in advance, and you got to think about this, and you put a lot of thought process into this. And absolutely, I want to hear out who else that you want to honor. And so
Yeah. Well, who I want to talk about is an 8-year-old boy. And I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. I mentioned before that from a very early age, I hear music and I see 2- and 3-dimensional shapes. It sounds more ethereal than it really is, but it's just this way that music occurred for me as a child. And when I first began learning piano at the age of 7, my teacher would play the songs that I was going to be learning, and I could see those same shapes across the instrument. And so whilst all my older brothers who were learning more traditionally, learning how to read music, learning how to understand the theory and the math of music, everything that I was doing was just based on learning the songs because of being able to see shapes and patterns. Now, I felt very guilty about that. I always thought I was doing the wrong thing because I wasn't learning the right way, which was the way my brothers were learning. And so what would happen for me is that every week as I got closer to my music lesson, I would become more and more anxious. Like, is this the week where I'm going to get caught for not actually learning how to read music. What would happen for me is that, my teacher would play the songs I'd be learning. I could see the shapes and patterns. I'd construct it for myself during the week. I'd get the song down. I was playing pretty well. And on my lesson day, I thought, okay, I'm supposed to be reading. So I would just sit there blankly staring at the page, thinking, okay, I'll look at the page so he'll think that I'm reading and I'll actually play the song. What I didn't know, he'd be going out to my mother saying, Neil's not reading. He thinks just staring at the page. He thinks he's fooling me, which he's not. But my mother said, yeah, but listen to how well he's playing. Look, for him, just let him go, let him do his own thing. I didn't know they'd made that deal. And so I lived in this state right throughout my, childhood, well into my teens, 15 or 16. I stopped having lessons with him. But I went through that whole period of time believing that the way that I was learning music was wrong and that I had shame about that. I wouldn't even go to a friend's home if they had a piano because I was scared that if they knew that I was having piano lessons, they'd take out some music and say, "I'll play this." And I couldn't read a note. I didn't need to. I found it just intimidating. So I just had my relationship to learning music that was completely based on this foundation of shape and pattern. Yet I always knew that I belonged to music and I always knew that I wanted to do music, but I didn't even know what that meant as a child. Even as a teenager, even in early adulthood, I still didn't know what that meant. And And so I came from a family of self-employed people. So I got into business in a young age. In Australia, when I was living here as an adult, we owned restaurants. We had several restaurants. And the goal for me was, the underlying goal for me, the publicly unrevealed goal was, I want to do well enough in business to earn enough money so I can retire young and do music. Whatever that meant, didn't even know. I just wanted to do music. I was successful in restaurants, but I was deeply unsatisfied. That was a weird thing, to be successful but unsatisfied, because I had the typical trappings: doing well, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, beautiful home in a beautiful area, driving an expensive car. I was way too self-impressed, way too arrogant. I'm in my 20s and had a successful business. Made a series of really bad business decisions, and then that translated into the stock market. When the stock market crash in the US of '89 hit Australia, the disruption of that really, we lost everything. We went through a complete financial wipeout, lost everything. And, I remember days, one particular day, standing by our fridge, opening the door, my 3 kids were standing there and there was just no food in the fridge, going out and selling my wedding jewelry just to get enough money to buy some food for the kids, like flat broke. And there was one particular day where they were putting up a board outside our home to auction our home. We were losing our home. Truck there taking away my car. And there was this particular moment where I had this insight, and I saw them taking this away, and suddenly, also viscerally, it occurred to me, wow, I'm losing everything that I have, but I'm losing nothing of who I am. And it was a very important experience for me to have that experience of I'm whole and intact and complete. I've only lost things. I am the same capable person. And in that moment, I suddenly saw this picture of my life as this equation, actually as a broken equation. I just saw this picture, oh, wow, I've been pursuing business to earn money to do what I love. And that occurred for me as a broken equation. And I suddenly thought, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to do what I love. And if there is such a thing as divine design, and I believe there is, then I'm willing to go down that path and trust them that some miracles will reveal themselves, and a direction and a pathway will open up, which is exactly what happened. So here I am as an adult with my wife, our 3 young children, flat broke, and I'm saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to pursue music. And people are like, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. I'm just going to do music because that's what I've always believed that I need to do. Yet I had financial responsibilities. It's like, what am I going to do? And out of the blue, I had a guy who I'd met. I didn't even really know him well, but his girlfriend at the time had worked for me, and we had a very good relationship. And he called me one day and said, look, I know what you're going through. I've got some cash. How about if I put some cash up to get you into business? All I really need is some interest on my investment. I don't need anything else. He was an angel, just out of the blue. And actually, he's become my closest friend, and we have a dear relationship to this day, nearly 35 years later. And so I thought, great, if I can get another business, set it up in a way, my wife and I had worked in the restaurants together, she can run the business, that'll provide us with the cash flow so I can pursue music, which I did. I had another meeting with a person who'd had a huge impact on me. And this was a guy who developed a method of music learning that was based on reading. And I never knew how to read music. And I figured if I'm going to do music, I'm going to have to learn the language that other musicians can relate to. So I began studying with him. He wanted to grow his teaching community. And I'd had a small business background. And I thought, I bet I can help him with that. So I became sort of, we formed a partnership. And that catalyst, the formulation of that partnership became the catalyst for us to come to the United States. My wife had been an exchange student in the United States. She did her senior year of high school. And when she'd gotten off the plane, their orientation was at Stanford University. She also had this visceral experience that she was meant to live out her life in the United States. And as a child, I always saw the US as the music epicenter of the world, and I wanted to live in the United States. And so here we were, really with no financial obligations in Australia, and a desire to just do something extraordinary. And we just felt called to come to the United States. So we wound up our lives, and I came to the United States with my wife, our 3 children, $5,000 to my name, and our life possessions in 3 suitcases.
Wow.
People are like, you are crazy. You don't know anyone there? You're not even an advanced musician. You don't even really know how to read. You've never had any teaching background. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm good. I'm going to figure this out. So we came to the United States. Of the $5,000, I spent $4,000 on an ad and put an ad in a local newspaper to teach music. Unfortunately, the ad worked. We would have been screwed if it didn't. I started to accumulate students, and very quickly I got a reputation as being a successful teacher. And I'm teaching this traditional method that this guy had shown me. So I'm teaching people how to read music, and that's the only thing that I knew how to do, but I'm loving it. And now I've got a successful practice, and we're doing okay financially, making ends meet. And I don't know what the direction's going to be, but I just know I'm meant to be here and doing what I'm doing. And then I get a phone call one day from this government agency, and they said, we're working with this young 8-year-old boy. He's blind. We think we can restore his sight. He's going into hospital fairly regularly for procedures, and it's pretty tough for this kid. We'd love him to have some activity interest. We've heard about you. Do you think you could teach him music? And I just said yes. I didn't even know what I was going to do. In fact, it wasn't until after I'd said yes where it suddenly occurred to me, I've just agreed to teach an 8-year-old kid. The only thing I know how to teach is this approach to reading music. And this kid's blind. What the heck am I doing? What am I going to do? And it wasn't until that moment that it actually consciously occurred to me for the very first time that, hang on, I never learned to read music. What was I actually doing? Because whilst it had occurred organically for me as a child, I was never really thinking about it. That was just innate. It was just part of my, my genetic relationship with music. And that was the very first time consciously that I thought, heck, I wasn't reading music. If I wasn't reading music, what was I doing? And so I sat down and actually started to look at it consciously. Oh, I see. I'm seeing my hand moving from this position to that position, and it's occupying this particular shape and that shape, and like a triangle here. And I started to bring language and consciousness and distinctions and terms of art to what it was that I'm doing. And I thought, I bet I can show this 8-year-old boy what it is that I'm doing. And I bet he could feel his way through these shapes and patterns. It's worth a shot. So this kid started having lessons, and I started showing him this approach, and he was doing so well. So he was learning so quickly. And I thought, well, being without sight, he's got a really developed ear. That's why he's doing so well. But I said to his dad, he'd been learning with me now about 3 months, and he had this whole repertoire of music that he was playing. And I said to his dad one day, this boy's name was Wade. I said, are you happy with Wade's progress? And his dad said, not only are we happy with it, but he's teaching his 4-year-old sister how to play this way, and she's blind too.
Wow.
And this was like a crucible moment. It's like, the experience for me was, wow, what the heck just happened? Like, even talking about it, I still get a rush through my body. I didn't know what had happened. I just knew something had happened in that moment. Yeah. Wow. If I can teach a boy, an 8-year-old boy who's blind, how to play based on shapes and patterns. And he can turn around and teach his 4-year-old sister to do it as well. And she's blind. What would happen if I showed typical learners how to do this? Maybe it would be like a nice music preschool. I still didn't know what I had in my hands.
Sure.
It would be like preschool before we got into real music, which I still thought was this reading approach. Fortunately, I had a pretty large studio. So I started sharing this concept with my other students, and there was a dramatic change in how quickly they were learning and how naturally they were learning and how quickly they were playing naturally. And I thought, wow, oh, well, this is probably happening because this way of looking at music is organic to me. But then I'm also here teaching this training system to other teachers. I wonder what would happen if I showed them this approach, whether they could replicate it. And so I started sharing these concepts with other teachers, and they came back saying, wow, we haven't seen anything like this. It's a completely different experience for our students, how quickly they're learning, how easily they're learning, the quality of music that they're able to play, and how the quantity of music that they're able to learn. And I knew at that point of time that I had something that needed exploring. So I went into this laboratory relationship with, I'm going to explore this as a system and see how far I can take it. Is this something where I can apply it to contemporary and to classical and to gospel and to blues and to jazz and composing and improvising and arranging? And how far could I take this before I really needed to introduce the theory and the math and the reading? And what resulted in that was, jumping ahead now, here we are now with, a global community of educators. So I've got 720 educators in my community across 12 countries. We have an online platform of students across 132 countries. The general public has spent, I don't know, about $150 million on my program. And what we're learning now, what's most interesting is that we're at this time where I said earlier that we are witnessing the arrival of a technological tsunami. I mean, we're at the stage now where we're normalizing the conversation about neural linking and downloadable intelligence. We're normalizing the conversation about human beings becoming a multi-planetary species, for heaven's sake. We're talking about, great, let's move the cars into the sky or under the ground. Let's digitize currencies. Let's decentralize, demonetize, let's digitize, let's democratize everything. We're going to raise the standard of living for anybody. We can do it for everybody. So let's bring entrepreneurship to solving the world's biggest problems like starvation and clean water and, the environmental concerns, etc. This is an incredible time in human history. And we are democratizing entrepreneurship. It's amazing what is happening in this day and age. And for creativity now to become the golden currency, what we're learning about creative musicianship is that it at a neurological, at a biological level, musicianship grows the brain more than twice as much as any other form of art or sport. Its impact on neural connectivity is exponentially greater. Increased connectivity translates to increased creative capability. So here we are now with this juxtaposition of this time in history where the world is revolutionizing before our very eyes. Creativity is critically important. And I have a system of learning that directly impacts the brain, provides critical neurological nutrition, and fundamentally impacts our creative capability. We have an opportunity to cause the breakthrough in people's access to their creative capability and elevate the creativity of humanity. And I attribute that to my experience of an 8-year-old boy who changed everything.
Wow. Wow. Man, that is just fascinating, Neil.
That might have been a longer story than you were wanting, Kevin, but
you know what? The thing is that's totally fine. That is totally fine. I mean, that was riveting. That was riveting. And I want to thank you for sharing. And I usually point out at the end of somebody sharing this experience, and all of this came from one relationship. Well, in this instance, all of this came from 2 relationships, and look at how many lives have
Mm,
been impacted.
mm.
And I don't know if you, I don't know your wife's name, but I just wrote down your wife and Wade. Um, that how many lives have been impacted because of the relationship that you have had with your wife, and then the relationship that you have had with Wade, hey, this 8-year-old boy that just came into your world and caused you to realize the value of what you had, and that now how many lives have been impacted? A lot
Yeah,
of lives, and that is powerful. And if that isn't a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration for anybody listening to this to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna double down on the relationships in my life. And I'm gonna focus on it, because you know what, it's always the relationships. The relationships are the most valuable asset we have, and
yes.
everything else stems from that. And thank you, Neil. Thank you so much. For anybody listening to this is like, man, Kevin, man, I love Neil. I love the way Neil shows up. I love what Neil had to share. How can they find out more about what you're doing in this world?
Well, across social media, I'm at the Neil Moore on all the platforms, or the website theneilmoore.com. But my organization is simplymusic.com.
Very good. Very good. Any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap, Neil?
Well, yeah, just one thing that one of the things, I've had the opportunity to tell this story, before, and aspects of it to others, and people often say, that's just like it supports the going for your dreams thing. But one of the things for me, how we'll often see it like the Academy Awards, or the Grammy Awards or whatever. Someone will win the award for best actor or best song or whatever the case, and they stand there and they say, this just proves if you believe in your dreams, they come true. I'm actually not somebody who believes that.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think there's a world of people who devote their lives to the accomplishment of something and never actually achieve it.
Mhm.
But what I do know for myself is that the opposite I do believe to be true. I've had so many situations over the journey, my entrepreneurial journey, my life journey, where I was confronted with something that seemed so overwhelming, so unconfrontable, where I was faced with this, and had people around me saying, just give up, mate, change direction. You're climbing the wrong mountain. You've got the ladder up against the wrong wall. But what I know is that if I gave up, that would guarantee that I would fail.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think the thing that has allowed this to come to fruition is that I've just stuck with it.
Mhm.
And that can be a tough call for a lot of people when they're facing apparently insurmountable complexities and life situations and problems. But I'm a bigger advocate for people not giving up on their dreams and not giving in when it seems inexhaustibly too difficult. And I think that's probably the quality that I've brought to this, that I just keep getting back in the ring,
Yeah.
knocked down, back in the ring.
Yeah.
And what's allowed me to do that is my wife. She's just there. Come on, I'll help you up. Get back in the ring. Keep going.
Mhm.
Her name's Hunter.
Hunter. Very good. Well,
Kevin,
that is
thank you.
amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Neil.
My
And
pleasure. You're awesome.
amazing. We'll just call it a wrap right here. I can't see any better way to end this conversation than right there on that note, and just having just honored Wade and Hunter the way that you have. Man, I love doing these interviews, and this has been at the top of my list, one of the favoriteest ones I have done. So thank you, Neil. I am excited to get this out there and share it with other people. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Lovely to see you. As always, you're a beautiful man. Thank you.
Well,
Love you
thank
very much.
you too.